New rule, I get a cup of coffee 30 minutes before the show, or at least hot Earl Grey tea with a slice of lemon. June 5th, 2014, on the People's Radio!
The People's Radio is an experimental, technocratic media format for the working class. The thoughts and opinions expressed on the People's Radio are not necessarily the thoughts and opinions of Organizing for Humanity, of the People's Radio, or of anyone else. Viewer discretion is advised.
Let's get going. Let's get into it. I gotta tell you, there is more things happening. There are more developments going on in the world, in science and technology, than I could possibly get to in a 1-hour podcast. It's impossible, but what I try to do is I try to focus on the important parts. I try to focus on how our American society is moving forward in this 21st century. Let's start by bashing Republicans. One of my favorite things to do. Now, I don't want people to just think that I'm anti-Republican just because I'm liberal. That's not the reality of the situation. I grew up conservative. I grew up voting Republican. I voted for Bush. I know. I regret it to this day, but I did. I always thought that the liberals were pussies and that the conservatives were your patriots and your strong Americans, and they knew what they were doing with business and commerce, and that they were looking out for the little guy. Meanwhile, the liberal elitist snobs were just college professors that lived inside books and didn't live in the real world. This is how I used to view things, but as I got older and I learned more and I got more responsibilities in life, suddenly that book learning starts to make some sense. Let's start off with Attorney General Eric Holder. Attorney General Eric Holder is really, really hated by the right wing in America, the Republican Party. And recently he got into it with Louis Gohmert, the Gomer Powell of our Congress, where Louis basically said, I know that law isn't a big deal to you, and the Attorney General of our country was told by this Republican ass that law was not a big deal to him. And Eric Holder put him in his place. He was like, don't you ever presume to say that to me. That it was an interesting moment. But let's get to what we're talking about here now. America used to have a group called the Domestic Terrorism Executive Committee. And it was under the Department of Justice. It was run by the Department of Justice, funded by the Department of Justice, and but it answered, of course, to the Department of Justice and the White House administration. And basically, what this committee did, what this group did, was they monitored extremist activities as far as domestic terrorism goes. They monitored basically the very extreme terroristic cells in America. And do not fool yourself for a moment in thinking that those things do not exist, because they do exist. We as a country have a long history of having some really, really wackos, and I want to get to that in a minute. But basically, after 9/11 happened, the United States government was in disarray, and they were pointing fingers at each other, and they were like, who's to blame? Who's to blame? And Bush came up with the whole Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Homeland Security was supposed to take care of these domestic terrorism issues. But Eric Holder has decided that's really not enough, and we need to bring back the Domestic Terrorism Executive Committee, which focus on extremists motivated by anti-government and racial hatred. And this was announced Tuesday of this week. Predictably, though, the far right is now going crazy. Now, let's explain why they're going crazy and why they're angry. We have a history of far right-wing terroristic activity in America. Like, let's go through some of these. In 1983, a far right-wing terrorist cell called The Order bombed a theater and a synagogue, and then they murdered a liberal talk show host, Alan Berg. Alan Berg was basically a liberal that was not a pussy. He did not take shit, and he was famous for having a radio show where he was very confrontational. He used to go after right-wing conservatives, and they killed him for it. In 1995, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols bombed the Murrah Federal building in Oklahoma. I was very young when this happened, but I do remember when it happened, and I do remember the pictures of that building, and a lot of people died. I think it was, off the top of my head, I think it was like 165, 168 people died. And this was a far right-wing terrorist attack, and they said that it was payback for Waco. Waco, of course, was basically, the government going in, and they messed up. They assaulted this cult compound. They could have done things differently, but I digress. Eric Rudolph, a far right-winger, bombed the Centennial Olympic Park because, according to him, the Olympics promoted socialism. Does that sound familiar? He then went on to bomb 2 abortion clinics and a lesbian bar because of his far right-wing ideology. So what is happening now that Eric Holder has said that he's going to reopen this committee to watch over domestic terrorism, right-wingers are going nuts. And we're talking about extreme right-wing. I'm not just saying the mainstream Republican Party. Pat Dollard, the documentarian Pat Dollard, he's a conspiracy theorist. He ran this story under the headline, Holder Mobilizes Group to Wage War on White Man. Yeah. Over at Alex Jones, right, that conspiracy theory website, they said, in reality, Holder's task force will undoubtedly focus on the Obama administration's political enemies, mainly returning military veterans, conservatives, and those who identify with the Tea Party. Such groups have been increasingly linked to terrorism by multiple federal agencies. Given the documented history of the federal government's involvement in facilitating terrorism, the administration will likely do whatever it can to create the necessary scenario to bolster its executive power. Now, Alex Jones' InfoWars unit over there, they're of the belief that the United States government is a terrorist organization, and they're trying to eliminate their competition, I guess. That's a very morbid view of reality, if you ask me. The conspiracy theory website The Daily Slave also said that Holder only obtained his job because he's black, and his support of government-financed terrorism. That's a really racist thing to say. Daily Slave concluded, simply put, this clown is an evil lawyer terrorist who should be tried for high crimes and treason. Wow, that's pretty extreme rhetoric right there. I mean, I wouldn't even go that far to say that type of things about, Anyway, another conservative website, the Daily Dose, published a post claiming that the Obama administration officials already exhibit behavior consistent with that of despotic tyrants. Wow, that's just crazy. Glenn Beck's The Blaze even reported on this. This is where it gets interesting, because even though once you move back over to more mainstream Republicans, their rhetoric is not as extreme and hyperbolic. The commenters on the internet go crazy, right? A commenter called Time Ryder, that's R-Y-D-E-R, wrote, this regime is now justifiably terrified that attempts to overthrow them and reestablish our constitutional government and the rule of law may occur. A Nazi-Stalin regime-like rule is about to begin, where people will be arrested and detained without evidence, but on suspicion alone. Unlike Germany, there are no allies to come to our rescue to stop it. These people live in their own little world. There's no other way to put it. I mean, the United States government is constitutionally tasked with the job of defending us and defending the American people. And when they actually, our attorney general, the guy who's supposed to be over our freaking laws, the highest judge in the land or whatever, when he says we're going to reopen a committee that helps monitor extreme terrorist activities in America to help make Americans safer, these idiots go apeshit. And I think, look, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. These are the people that we should be watching. These people use some extreme rhetoric, extreme ideology, and they are the ones that constantly talk about, I'm going to grab a gun and shoot the government. Well, the problem with that is the government is American citizens. It's employees. It is American citizens that got a government job, and they're just working that job, right? That is the government. So when somebody says, I'm going to shoot the government, they're talking about shooting American citizens. That's what they're talking about doing. You can't just shoot City Hall. You have to shoot the American citizens that work at City Hall. Moving on, I'm going to run the tape here. You guys have got to see this to believe it. In 2014, at a cotton warehouse, the Atkinson Cotton Warehouse in Memphis, Tennessee, the year 2014, this is the way that supervisors were talking to their employees.
He decided to use his phone as a weapon to fight back. He recorded his attempt to drink water from a fountain in the warehouse office.
Hey, I need to put a sign here that says white people only.
He recorded his attempt to use the microwave.
I need to use the microwave.
Nah, hell no.
Why I can't use your microwave, man?
No, you're not white.
For real? I
That's
can't
a
use
white man. That's a white man. We don't even let Larry use it.
Larry been there 10, 20 years, and he's a black guy also.
In the recording, the supervisor also talks about the days where blacks and whites were kept separate.
But back then, nobody thought anything about it. Now, it's everybody is made to where, it's not being bad.
About 30 seconds later in the recording, listen to this.
Put your stand on the water then, because I'm finna drink it. What they do when they catch me drinking your water?
That's when we hang.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I mean, this is the 21st century. I would have thought we would have gotten past our racial prejudices by now, but I guess not, because not only in Memphis, Tennessee cotton factory do we still have racism, we also have racism in upstate New York. This video recently went viral on the internet this week.
Talk to this fucking nigga right now. I'm telling you, he's video recorded me. He scared the shit out of Anthony. He started in the car. He wanted to run his mouth talking about BB and the trashy mother. Fucking say something to him
said
now.
that.
He's got me on videotape, and I'm still flipping the fuck out.
You called me a nigger. Go
I
ahead.
called you a nigger. You're a nigger. Nasty fucking nigger.
Okay. You might want to get
Because he's a fucking loser. That's why he thinks he's gonna get something out of it.
Oh no, Warren. I don't sue people.
Oh, he knows the cops. How many cops have I stripped for? You ain't getting fired, bitch.
Okay.
Tell him, dude. You will fucking kill him. Don't even fucking... I'm telling you right now.
That's very,
John,
very good.
I will fucking yank his ass out the car.
Please do.
I don't know. What? Because he wants to put it on YouTube, try and act hard because I called him a racist? Because he's a racist, ignorant nigger? And tell him what? He's a racist fucking nigger? Alright, you're done. My lawyer's involved.
Good. Thanks.
Stay here. My husband's coming.
Okay. Sure.
Where's my coffee?
You know, I sent a tweet to that lovely lady. She's not a lovely lady. I was being sarcastic. She's a disgusting human being. I sent a tweet to her. You can follow me on Twitter at OFHDirector. And I basically said, you know, you're a stripper, you strip for cops, and you're acting kind of sporadic there. Maybe you should get yourself checked for syphilis, because after syphilis goes into the advanced stages, it infects your brain and it makes you start acting all funny. So I hope she gets herself checked for STDs.
3D printing is a rapid prototyping technique that's used to build solid parts directly from a CAD model by printing solid structure a layer at a time. 3D printing can be used with many different materials. We're interested in thermoplastic polymers because we can compound them with a wide variety of other materials to control final properties, making blended composites and functional materials. These thermoplastic compounds are suitable for 3D printing because they can be melted and deposited a layer at a time, really a bead at a time, to form a cross-section of your part. When 3D printing was first introduced to the aerospace industry, we were eager to find ways to apply it. We understood that 3D printing could build complex structures. We realized that we could build advanced design geometries not previously possible. We knew it could build parts quickly. We could send a CAD drawing to a 3D printer, and we would arrive at a functional part within a day. So early on, we began a project to develop new thermoplastic compounds that could be used in a 3D printer and applied to our manufacturing concept. We explored a wide range of polymers and reinforcements, such as carbon fiber, nanotubes, powders, and other fillers. Each new composition designed to address engineering functionality. We extended the concept to not only control the composition and functionality of our part, but to control the composition at every location of the part, changing it on the fly as needed. We called this process pointwise composition control. Why would you want to control the material properties of a part? You might want to make a part very strong and stiff in some locations, and perhaps temperature resistant, and in other locations, you might make it transparent for communication. One of the limitations of conventional 3D printers is the build envelope. You're restricted to building in a heated oven or limited to building inside a chamber. We've mounted an extruder on a large 6-axis articulated robot so we can deposit large structures. And we've incorporated mixing and blending equipment in line so that we can adjust composition on the fly. This part was built to capture the imagination of designers. This part visually communicates that you can build a single structure with very different geometries at different locations of the part. But you can also control composition. This part happens to be graded from green to blue. This part could also be graded in thermal properties, electrical properties, or it could be graded in other types of functionality. So, let's say you're going to build a hand-launched UAV, and you wanted to build all of the electronics embedded in the wings of this small UAV. You'd want a strong and stiff structure for the internal wing, but you'd want a lightweight, durable skin and solvent-resistant material for fuel storage locations. Different functional properties require different material compositions. That's what pointwise composition control allows. If you extend this process all the way to our manufacturing concept, you could build an entire airplane. Now, if we're going to use this process in manufacturing to build a full-size cargo plane, we're going to need several robots. But that's okay, robots are cheap. The robots can be stationary floor-mounted and rail-mounted overhead on a gantry system. Several robots, all at different stations, building structure in concert, all at once. We're going to build with structural materials, we're going to build with functional materials. We're going to control density, stiffness, and material properties all over this airplane. And because we build directly from our CAD drawing, we're going to be able to quickly and affordably build complete products that have geometry and design that have not been possible before. This is the factory of the future.
"3D printing is going to change the entire landscape of manufacturing and the workforce of the world," which is why I bring it up regularly on the People's Radio. We're going to have a lot of people that lose their jobs. When you can set up a robotic factory that just prints up whatever you want, including an airplane from start to finish, then you lose a lot of jobs. Which is why we need to continue bashing the far right-wing ideology of "I got mine, screw you," which is what they say. They don't want to help people without jobs. They don't want to help the poor. And you know You know who agrees with me? The most unlikely of scenarios has occurred, and the Catholic Church is in agreement with me. This is from the Washington Post. Taking direct aim at libertarian policies promoted by American conservatives, the Honduran cardinal, who is one of Pope Francis's top advisors, said Tuesday that today's free market system is a new idol that is increasing inequality and excluding the poor. This economy kills, said Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga. I hope I pronounced that name right. Cardinal, if you're listening, just forgive me with your Christianness or whatever. He went on to say that the Pope has a profound knowledge of life of the poor growing up in Argentina, and that is why he insists that the elimination of the structural causes for poverty is a matter of urgency that can no longer be postponed. The hungry or sick child of the poor cannot wait. He also argued that the personal charity was insufficient to solve global problems. Solidarity is more than a few sporadic acts of generosity. Now, libertarians they honestly believe that if we just got rid of welfare entirely, all forms of welfare, all of it, that charity would just step up to the plate and fill in the needs of the poor. Well, if that's true, then charity should charity should already be taking care of the needs of the poor. But reality is the realm that libertarians don't live in. In reality, charity is not enough to take care of the needs of everyone in need. He went on to say, trickle-down economics is a deception, and he declared that the invisible hand, or also known as the free market, is a cruel trick to exploit the poor. He also slammed libertarians and said, many of these libertarianists, I love that because it makes them sound like the cultists that they are. Many of these libertarianists do not read the social doctrine of the church. It should be noted that Paul Ryan and Rand Paul are both libertarians that follow Ayn Rand's ideology of libertarianism, which is objectivism. Objectivism is when libertarianism becomes full-blown 100% cult. I can't say it enough. They believe, I got mine, screw everybody else. And what makes it a cult, and this is the reason why you, the listener, should never argue with libertarians, because it's like arguing with a creationist. They believe in this thing called the invisible hand of the free market. It is something that cannot be empirically tested. It has never been shown to be real. Much like psychics and mediums and chiropractors and homeopaths, it's something that science cannot detect. It does not exist. It has never been shown to exist in reality, in the lab, in empirical science. But they believe in it anyway. Sam Seder from the Majority Report FM recently had a debate with a libertarian professor, and he flat out said, I challenge you to go on YouTube and to watch this. Just type in Sam Seder debate and you'll see it. It's Sam Seder, S-E-D-E-R, I do believe. The libertarian professor flat out said, I reject any empirical science that disagrees with my view. That is a superstition. That is a cult. That is... You're flat out saying, I reject reality and I substitute it with my own personal belief. The free market, the invisible hand, does not work. We've shown that time and time again in reality, in society. Moving on. Gawker has an interesting story. Now, Gawker is basically just a news site that kind of pokes fun of the trends that are happening on the internet. Gawker uncovered that there is a treasure trove of conservatives on Twitter that tweeted that they demanded that this, Bo Bergdahl He was a prisoner of war in Afghanistan being held by the Taliban for years. And check this out. I'm just going to try to go through this really quickly because we're kind of sort of running out of time on the program, it looks like. Check this out. Here's chaos2/504. That is at TomABN_Thomas. How many more years is the Obama administration going to let Sergeant Bose Bergdahl be held by Taliban in Pakistan? June 30th, 2009. The date Sergeant Bowie Bergdahl was captured by the Taliban, and Obama does nothing to get him released. What if this was your son? All right. Now, after Obama actually negotiated the release of him, this same guy tweets, "Nice job, Obama, for trading 5 hardcore Al-Qaeda for 1 infantryman. The terrorists are laughing at us." And he also tweeted, "Obama does nothing for free a true warrior sitting in a Mexican prison, but he calls his terrorists to free Bergdahl." Wow, that was a change of heart. Here we find other people doing the same thing. This is George McAdoo on Twitter. "Thank you for the opportunity to sign the petition to bring home Bo Bergdahl. Semper Fi." Then after Obama actually got him freed, "Army wanted to shoot Bergdahl. He should be stand him against the wall with Obama." So just because Obama freed him, now he's a traitor or whatever. There's page after page of these. Here's "Let's bring this great American Bo Bergdahl home. We should not rest until the government does its job and brings him home. Bring Sergeant Bowie." It's in all caps. "Bring Sergeant Bowie home. Mr. Obama, what are you doing anyway?" And then after he's freed, "Bergdahl is a traitor. He should be executed. Obama should be impeached." This is the same people. Do they understand that their tweets are saved so that we can go back and read them? Here's one. Hawkeye. It's at InHuggerMugger on Twitter. "Please pray for the return of Bo Robert Bergdahl, captured by Afghan Taliban, June 30th, 2009. Prisoner of war. Bring Bo home." And then after he was brought home, "Thanks for your comments just now concerning Bergdahl, the traitor. I agree, Obama is so reckless with American interests." Page after page of this. "Please support Bo Bergdahl." This is the conservative diva. "Please support him. He's a prisoner of war and we need him home." And then after he was freed, "They died because of a traitor. Outrage." Jazzy Vajazleds. "Will this administration do anything to bring prisoner of war Bo Bergdahl home?" And then after he was brought home, "I signed the petition. Where's the petition to hang that traitor?" There's more and more and more. Oh, it's just page after page of that. These conservatives claim to support something until it actually happens. And if Obama does it, they hate it. If Obama does something, even if it's something that they have publicly demanded that Obama does, they suddenly instantly turn their mind, change their mind, and just say, "It was a bad idea. It was a bad idea. I can't believe Obama did it." Dear President Obama, if you are listening to me, this is what I want you to do. I want you to come out tomorrow and say, "I, your President Obama, support the breathing of air. I think that breathing air and drinking water is a good thing for a human being." Just do that and then walk away from the podium. And I guarantee you within 15 minutes there's going to be some Republican numbnut on Fox News claiming, "Well, hold on now, the scientists are divided on this issue. Breathing air and drinking water may not be good for you after all."
Rooftop solar benefits everyone. So why do utilities want to kill it? Today, the system we have in America is working. Here's how. Every day, solar delivers extra energy from rooftops to neighbors. Utilities get paid for that, even though they didn't produce it. So the solar customer gets fair credit for contributing to local energy supply. This is net metering. More solar means less need for power plants or power lines that you have to pay for. Energy gets cheaper, cleaner, better for everyone. So, why do utilities want to kill solar? Utilities are monopolies. They've never faced competition. So when solar makes electricity cheaper and cleaner for everyone, utilities lose profits. They attack solar, and they attack net metering to eliminate their competition and protect the past. The future is now. Choice and competition benefit all of us. The choice is yours. The power is yours. Don't let utilities take it from you. Learn more at allianceforsolarchoice.com.
All right, now it's time to turn our attention back to climate change, environmentalism, all that good stuff, all that hippie stuff. You know, I must confess that I am the biggest, me and my wife are the biggest fans of Cosmos, the new reboot of Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you have not seen the original Cosmos with the patron saint of science, Carl Sagan, you should watch it. It's called Cosmos, A Personal Voyage, and it's basically a brilliant explanation of the history of science and like how we got to where we are today, and it really just blows your mind away. And even though it was done back in the late 70s, it still holds up to this day. It is still all the information in it is still valid. It's just we've learned more since then. So they decided to update it and reboot it, and it's on primetime Fox Sunday nights. And actually, this coming up Sunday, I do believe, is the very final episode of Cosmos. It is a 13-episode season. So don't worry if you haven't seen it, you can go online. You can watch it at Fox.com. You can download torrents or whatever. I'm not saying pirate, but I cannot publicly recommend pirating because that's illegal. But there are places online where you can see this. And the most recent episode, I have not seen it yet. I've seen every episode until the most recent episode. Me and my wife will watch it tonight. It deals with climate change. And I can't wait to see it. So Neil deGrasse Tyson was recently interviewed by Chris Mooney. Chris Mooney sat down with him. There was some interesting tidbits of information that came out of this. They talked about climate change, and they talked about the Republican Party and how the Republican Party has basically dropped the ball on this whole issue. Some interesting things to note is that this previous climate change episode of Cosmos actually tied in the ratings with ABC's The Bachelorette. That's insane. That's incredible. When I heard over a year ago that Fox of all channels was actually going to do a primetime science show, specifically Cosmos, an actual, empirical science-based show, I was blown away. I was like, no way. This has got to be an internet hoax. This is too good to be true. When I heard they were actually going to put it on prime time for all of America to see, that was just, I was like, no way, because isn't America just reality TV shows at this point? Haven't they just dumbed down TV to the point that, you can't possibly get any dumber? Well, I guess there was some truth to that statement, because the only way that they could go was up in the TV landscape. So they decided to take a chance and do Cosmos. And one of the reasons why they were so excited about this was because Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, and basically everything that he does TV-wise turns to gold. Everything that he does TV-wise makes money. So they were like, yeah, if he's going to do it, then we're on board. So they remade Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he's an astrophysicist, by the way. And it's just, It's insane that the ratings are it's, to quote him in this article, in the interview, I should say, to quote him, the ratings are exceeding our expectations, right? He said you had entertainment writers putting The Walking Dead in the same sentence as Cosmos, and Game of Thrones in the same sentence as Cosmos. How's Cosmos doing against Games of Thrones? That is an extraordinary fact that, you know, somebody would actually just say. Like, you know, compare the two. It's incredible. Science is actually making a comeback. I love it. I love it. People are actually interested in science. I highly recommend that you watch this most recent episode of Cosmos because it does dwell on climate change. And like I said, to quote Bill Nye the Science Guy, climate change is the most important issue of our time. Let's see. They also talked about other things. He was talking about the Republicans and how they have spent so much time and energy denying climate change. Neil deGrasse Tyson said, at some point, I don't know how much energy they have to keep fighting it. It's an emergent scientific fact. The Republican Party, so many of its members are resistant to embracing the facts of climate change that the legislation they should be eager to influence, they are left outside the door because they think the debate is whether or not it's happening, rather than what policy and legislation can serve their interest going forward. So because they've denied it for so long, and because it is actually a scientific fact, they're still stuck in the denial phase, which has prevented them from moving forward into the, okay, let's make law that we agree with phase. That's just insane. So now let's move on to what is happening about it, right? I have so many reports here because, I mean, this just exploded. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? I'm sure you've seen it in passing on the news, and you may have exactly known what you were seeing. You may not. That's what I'm here for, to try to help explain science. So basically, we had two different ways that we could address climate change, specifically our carbon output, right? Our CO2 output and our carbon emissions in America. One was we get Congress together and they write a bill, they create legislation that cuts and curtails carbon emissions, and this was called cap and trade. Basically, what they were going to do was they were going to put a carbon tax on companies. So if you had a power plant or a manufacturing plant or an industrial operation, and you emitted a certain amount of CO2 over a certain amount of time, at the end of the year, the IRS comes in and says, all right, you owe us this amount in taxes because you've damaged the environment this amount, right? And the Republicans and right-wing conservatives, not only here in America, but in Australia, cried, no, we can't do that. That'll wreck and decimate the economy, and we'll all die, and the world will open up a fissure, and Satan himself will come out and eat your children. Because they live in an alternate reality. What can I say? So the second way that we could address this was kind of sort of the way Jimmy Carter kind of started to go after it, and then he got voted out of it. He got voted out, right? Jimmy Carter started his whole, hey guys, we're wrecking our environment, we're wasting too much, we're doing too much. But that was kind of a downer to the American people, and the American people were like, we don't want to hear that. We want to hear that the party's never going to end, that we can just party our asses off. And along came Ronald Reagan to say, hey guys, I'm the corporate spokesman, and I'm here to tell you everything will be all right as long as you go shopping. And they went for that, but whatever. So the way that this is going to work is they're going to use the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to actually regulate carbon emissions through the Clean Air Act. Now, the Clean Air Act was this like bill or what have you that was put into place a long time ago. some time ago, I should say. I think it was the 1990s, actually. I've got the information here, but there's just so much to go through. I can't remember everything off the top of my head. I'm not a super genius. I'm just a genius. Nah, I'm just kidding. So the way that it works is basically the EPA has the legislative authority to regulate our air that we breathe to a certain extent because the Clean Air Act gives them that authority. So basically, if you're living in a home and you're just chilling out watching TV, watching Sunday Night Football or whatever, and then somebody decides to open up a coal plant next door to you and they just start spewing out, ash and fumes, and you're sitting there all, I can't take it. Instead of you having to move away, you can just call up the EPA and be like, yo, man, they're like screwing up my air, right? So the EPA has been using that over the years to actually regulate and say, look, guys, you got to put, smokestack scrubbers on these things. You can only put these smokestacks in certain areas and in certain locations, and you can only put out a certain amount. But now they're going to tighten it down even further because, we haven't done enough, climate change and all that. So what they've done is they've signed into law Monday of this week new EPA regulations that's going to cut our power plant emissions by 30% by the year 2030. So over the next 15 and a half years, they're going to get 30% of our power plant carbon emissions down. Now of course, the right wing is reacting, right? And they're saying, oh my God, the entire economy is going to be decimated. There's no way that we'll be able to generate electricity. There's no way that, okay, so check this out. The EPA director knew that they were going to be saying this crap. So she's already put out a statement. In the 60s, I'm quoting her now. In the 60s, when smog choked our cities, critics cried wolf and said EPA action would put brakes on auto production. They were wrong. Instead, our air got cleaner, our kids got healthier, and we sold more cars. Thank you, EPA. In the 1990s, critics cried wolf and said fighting acid rain, remember acid rain, would make electricity go up and our lights would go out. They said that industry would, and I quote, die a quiet death. Well, they were wrong again. Industry is alive and well. Our lights are still on, and we have dramatically reduced acid rain. So time after time, when science pointed to health risks, special interests cried wolf to protect their own agenda, not the agenda of the American people. And time after time, we followed the science, we protected the American people, and the doomsday predictions never happened. There you have it. She's right. Every single time that the EPA has, cut emissions and cut pollution, it's worked out for the better. Now, we're getting reports now from the executive director of the Sierra Club. This is one of the oldest and largest, most successful environmental protection groups, nonprofits in existence. He's saying, check it out, guys. Stock alert, woo-woo. It's clear that these regulations are going to be affecting let me start the quote over because I was actually paraphrasing and I need to stop doing that. Mike Brune, executive director of Sierra Club, said, if you're working in the solar or wind industry, you should feel very happy right now. Those are the industries that are going to be growing faster than the rest of the economy. It's clear that those are going to be the industries to work in, invest in, and watch. They are about to explode in terms of growth, right? So basically, what's going to happen is the EPA is going to start to tighten down the amount of emissions that power companies can do, and that is going to help the cost of solar and wind alternative renewable energies. It's going to drive people to go to them and to use them more, and by the scale of manufacturing going up, by mass producing more and more of these wind turbines, solar photovoltaic cells, the price of them is going to go down. That's what happens with the scale of manufacturing. When you scale up, when you manufacture more, the price of it goes down. And I got to tell you, folks, here's the thing. If the price of solar and wind goes down any more, it will be cheaper than fossil fuels. And then we all win. We all get a cleaner future, cleaner air, cleaner water, and our children will live in a cleaner environment with less cancer and less death.
Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time. And then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Now take it a step further. Imagine that everything was made just for a single shade of that species, or gender, or ethnic or religious subdivision. We can recognize here a shortcoming, in some circumstances serious, in our ability to understand the world. Characteristically, we seem compelled to project our own nature onto nature. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, more humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals. Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins. Our thoughts and feelings are not fully under our own control. And on top of all this, we're making a mess of our planet and becoming a danger to ourselves. The trapdoor beneath our feet swings open. We find ourselves in bottomless freefall. If it takes a little myth and ritual to get us through a night that seems endless, who among us cannot sympathize and understand? We long to be here for a purpose, even though, despite much self-deception, none is evident. The significance of our lives and our fragile planet is then determined only by our own wisdom and courage. We are the custodians of life's meaning. We long for a parent to care for us, to forgive us our errors, to save us from our childish mistakes. But knowledge is preferable to ignorance. Better by far to embrace the hard truth than a reassuring fable. Modern science has been a voyage into the unknown, with a lesson in humility waiting at every stop. Our common sense intuitions can be mistaken. Our preferences don't count. We do not live in a privileged reference frame. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal.
Once again, my listeners, we have reached the final segment of the People's Radio. I got to tell you, I need to learn to compile information a little faster because I have so many advances in technology that I don't have enough time to get to them. We need to remember, we are approaching the singularity. Our technology is now accelerating. Our discoveries, new inventions, new creations are accelerating at a rate that I cannot possibly keep up with, that you cannot possibly keep up with. We now have 8 billion people on this planet all working on problems and working on solutions to those problems. And it's a great time to be alive. We still have a lot of work to do. We've got to change climate change. Right here, one last thing about climate change before we move on to science and technology discoveries. Air pollution has been linked to irregular heartbeats. That's right. The authors, short-term exposure to air pollution could increase a person's risk of irregular heartbeat or blood clots in the lung. The authors from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine wanted to examine biological impacts of blah, 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 blah. The study was published in the journal Heart. This is being reported on by The Guardian. The study was published in the journal Heart. It looked at 400,000 heart attacks and 2 million emergency admissions, cardiovascular problems, and 600,000 deaths. And they discovered that air pollution causes, or has been linked. Correlation does not mean equal causation, but there is a correlation between air pollution and irregular heartbeats. So if you're having heart problems, blame the Republicans, because the liberals have been trying to clean up our air for the past, 40 years, and the Republicans have been saying, no. There's another now we're going to get into science and technology and advances. Quantum entanglement is an incredible thing that I don't have time to explain right now, but basically, in a nutshell, Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He actually didn't believe in it. He thought that it was a flaw in the experiment and in the math. But basically what happens is you can take two quantum things, particles, whatever, and you spin them, and if you affect one, then the other is affected, right? And even if you draw them apart by thousands of miles, the effect on one causing the effect on the other is instantaneous, which breaks the speed of light, which is the reason why Einstein was like, that's some spooky shit, right? So, a long time ago, there was a physicist that came up with an experiment to see whether or not this quantum entanglement thing was real. And now you're actually starting to have the technology to be able to carry out that experiment. And it looks like that they've done it. Well, they've done a portion of this experiment, and it looks like entanglement between islands more than 100 kilometers apart has already been demonstrated, and statistically, finally setting blah blah blah. It sounds anyway. Look, the point being, there is a possibility. The scientific community is very divided on this issue because we don't know yet. It's still under investigation, but there is a possibility that we could possibly have instantaneous communication, something like Star Trek subspace. You know how they would be way out there in space, but still be able to, transmit back home within a few seconds. Might be possible. That might actually be possible. But we wouldn't be sending a signal through space. We would be taking advantage of some sort of quantum tunneling thing that we still do not yet understand. Moving on, MIT students have created solar panels that work in the shade. This is coming from Fast Company. That's fastcoexist.com. This is kind of cool, man. These are graduate students at MIT. I'm not going to bore you with the specifics, but they've basically redesigned the solar cells and how they're connected together so that they perform better even in the shade, even if some of your rooftop is in the shade or in cloudy conditions most of the day. They've learned to increase the efficiency by the output, I should say, by about 25%, which means that people that normally would be like, well, I can't have solar panels because I don't get that much sunlight. Well, now they can get solar panels. And for you investors listening to my program, these students are so excited. They have already formed a company to make these new solar cells. It's called United Solar. So if you've got some money to invest, you might want to look into that because it sounds like it is going to be the next big thing in solar. Here's some good information. Now, if you listen to the People's Radio, you know that I've really harped on the fact that our House Science Committee, right, our House Budget Committee that is over science and technology here in America is a bunch of Republican idiots that do not understand science. But despite that, it seems that the monkeys with the typewriters accidentally typed a sentence because And this is not much, so don't get excited, but NASA's budget is going to increase $250 million next year. That's a good thing, because increasing NASA's budget is a wonderful thing. For every $1 that is spent on NASA, we get $8 economic return into our economy. So spending money on NASA gives us wonderful, great technology spin-offs, such as the microwave. Like the Apollo program basically gave us half of the technologies that we use and take for granted today. So anytime that we're funding NASA, we are funding cutting-edge technology. We are funding the development of new, exciting technology that will help us explore space, but that technology also helps us here at home make our world better. NASA is always coming up with new materials, new ways of communication, new computers. I mean, they're always working on cutting edge. So to hear that the stupid idiots in the House of Representatives have actually passed a budget that is a very, very, very slight increase of $250 million next year is not bad news, but it's not exactly the most exciting news in the world either. I mean, personally, I think we should increase NASA budget tenfold. If we know that they're making all this cutting edge technology and this technology is making our lives better, then why don't we just write them a blank check and be like, bam, here, go to Mars, build a city on the moon, build a research station around Jupiter. Come on, let's get this puppy going. Let's explore space. Let's live this Star Trek dream. Let's do it. We have the money. We have a $3 trillion per year in the federal budget. And NASA only gets $17.8 billion. That's it. I mean, that's not even 1%. It's like not even 0.1%. I mean, it's just insanity. NASA needs more funding, and we could do it. In contrast to NASA getting $17.89 billion, right? The United States military gets over $750 billion per year. Not to mention all of the what they call the black ops, the whatever it's called. Like they give the Pentagon money that's not even audited, and we don't even know the amount, because it's supposed to be for classified stuff. You add all that up, we basically spend $1 trillion on Department of Defense, Pentagon, the U.S. military, and all that stuff each year, but we only spend $17 billion on NASA? Are you kidding? Think of it this way. The Iraq War cost $1 trillion. The Afghanistan War cost over $1.7 trillion and counting. It's still racking up because we're still fighting it. Meanwhile, we only give NASA $17 billion. Look, think of it this way. If you were to add up every single penny that we have ever given NASA from the time that NASA was created to now, every single tax dollar penny that we have given to them, if you add all of it up, it still is not as much as our bank bailout in 2008 or 2009, whenever it went through. Our bailout to the banks for the recession was more money by a stroke of a pen than NASA has ever received in all of its existence. We can afford it. We can stroke that pen again, and we can tell NASA, get to work. Build us some super awesome spaceships. I've only got 2 minutes left here. A Dutch company has got a new generation wind turbines. It's called the Archimedes windmill, and basically it is a wind turbine that is small and it's extremely efficient, and you can just put it in your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Your local city council could pop 4 or 5 of them up, and they're not really big, 400 foot, those white ugly things. They're small, they're smaller than a cell tower, and you could put them on tops of buildings and stuff like that, and they're not really big. They don't have big blades on them. They're not all that distracting. So maybe people will actually be more receptive to them. And they're supposed to be more efficient and better. So once again, wind technology is taking off. Last here, Quantum dot solar cells break conversion efficiency record. They are now working in the lab on this new solar cell thing, and dude, seriously, they're getting solar cells to be way, way, way more efficient. And lastly, this is from Engadget. Scientists solve solar energy's burning question, how to make it cheaper than fossil fuels. And basically what they've done is we have these things called solar thermal plants, and you basically direct the solar energy to water to heat up the water, and then when the water boils up to steam, you can run a turbine off of it. Well, it's never really been cheaper than fossil fuels because you can burn coal or you can burn gas, and you can basically flash that steam at a higher temperature to make the wind turbine, operate better and more efficient. Well, now scientists have solved that problem. You can go read it by Daniel Cooper on Engadget. Scientists solve energy's burning question, how to make it cheaper than fossil fuels. Type that into Google, it should pull up. They have figured out how to use solar power to heat up energy to 570 degrees Celsius, which is the flash point. So now solar thermal plants are cheaper and better than fossil fuel plants, than coal plants. We have done it, folks. The day of solar has arrived. Solar power is the future. Once again, thank you for listening to The People's Radio.